It's an honor now to introduce my good friend, Andy Levin, whose work here in Michigan and nationally I've admired deeply since long before he entered Congress. Andy Levin's life's work of championing the working class, human rights, and green energy has never felt more urgent with the colliding crises of the pandemic, racial injustice, and climate change. As the only member of Congress who ran a state workforce agency, which is really cool, and worked as a union organizer and a green energy entrepreneur, Andy meets every challenge by asking the same question: how do we put workers at the center of the solution? Andy describes his politics as practical progressivism. As a poet, I love the alliteration. He champions bold policies to tackle our most urgent needs while finding bipartisan ways to get things done. Thank you so much for being here, Congressman.
Well, it's great to see you, Michelle. Thanks so much for having me. First thing I got to say is love my Ro Khanna. Really, he and I are thick as thieves on so many things. And he's just a real awesome progressive and a great thought leader. So Michelle, this work we're doing is so important. Let me start a little bit where Ro left off about the importance of what is happening here, like this thing you're doing and the role of all the folks watching. Look, so okay, the president has negotiated his bipartisan deal on infrastructure. Fine. Does it include human infrastructure like childcare, like the caring economy? Does it include like almost everything we want on climate change? Like, no, it doesn't. So this reconciliation thing is really important. And I agree with Ro that it doesn't require that we deal with the filibuster, because, you know, reconciliation can be passed by Democrats alone. But come on, friends, that means every single Democratic senator has to go for it. And so how much pressure you put on, how much talk, how many phone calls, how many emails, how many demonstrations like tomorrow at the White House, how much action there is around this will literally determine how much we can shoehorn into that reconciliation package, the the fiscal year 2022 budget that we need to do as a companion, as an absolutely necessary companion to the bipartisan agreement the president made. And let me just speak personally to the pieces I've got in here in the mix. I mean, I wrote and introduced the Electric Vehicle Freedom Act, the EV Freedom Act, with AOC last Congress, and now it's here again. It lines up perfectly with the president saying he wants 500,000 chargers out there. But what we need to be specific. We need high-speed chargers comprehensively throughout the whole national highway system, including Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and Alaska, to crush range anxiety and make sure people can drive an EV from any point to any other point without worrying about running out of juice. Plus, people who live in an apartment or a house without a garage, we need charging infrastructure in frontline and vulnerable communities. And we put workers' provisions in there like you can't believe, like neutrality if workers want to organize, like the kind of training programs that the IBEW has for, so its members can do these jobs. We're talking about thousands and thousands of good union jobs. Similarly, with Elizabeth Warren, Ed Markey, and AOC, I introduced the Build Green Infrastructure Jobs Act. That's electrifying school buses, city buses, rapid transit, high-speed rail, everything. And again, lots of good jobs. And then Senator Warren and I introduced the Buy Green Act of 2021 to spend $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years for the federal government, but also state and local governments to have green everything. We've got to lead. There's almost no way we can act fast enough, broadly enough, boldly enough to meet this crisis. And so we've got to keep on pushing. I'm trying to do it across everything. So I introduced the Sustainable Investment Policy Act and the Retiree Sustainable Investment Opportunities Act so that workers can invest their pension money and their retirement money in a way that honors their own values, about our environment, our climate, and human rights for workers around the world. And stay tuned, because I've got a bill coming on green buildings, which won't surprise you, Michelle, because of, I started and I ran for so many years the PACE market here in Michigan, Lean and Green Michigan. We've got to have set date certains by which all new buildings will be zero net energy or better, and have standards and funding for people to retrofit all the existing building stock. So we've got to act comprehensively across the board, absolutely end subsidies for fossil fuels, have much more robust subsidies for people to electrify, buy EVs, solar panels, wind, geothermal, battery storage, everything, so we can rocket our way towards a sustainable world. It cannot happen 1 second too soon. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks so much, Andy. I love everything you were saying, but something that really resonated with me was when you were talking about empowering local governments. As you know, I'm a recent county commissioner, and I founded our county's environmental council, and still serve on that. And I really see how difficult it is for local governments, even when they want to do the right thing, to do it. They need the resources. And so, hearing about money for weatherization and for electrifying their fleets, and then helping to get more EV charging stations, which is the owner of a Chevy Volt, I would love personally. Anyway, I love all the legislation that you're talking about, and the multi-sector aspect of it. Do you have time for a couple of questions from our audience?
Absolutely. That's the best part.
It is. Okay. First up, Shalom from Greenbelt, Maryland, is concerned about Americans buying large vehicles, non-electric vehicles, suggests the federal government could subsidize electric vehicles, maybe with bigger subsidies for smaller, more efficient vehicles. You've already talked a little bit about EVs, but do you have any further thoughts?
Right. But my legislation is about charging infrastructure, and I'm right there with Shalom about what they're talking about. Not only do we need to continue and expand subsidies, we've got to make them point of sale subsidies. This thing about how, well, when you file your taxes next, you'll get a tax break, and it's complicated, and no, we've got to put it just like I think they did with cash for clunkers some years ago. We've got to make it like when you buy the EV, it comes right off the price, and let the dealer and, the Uncle Sam sort it out. So, we should make that happen. There are bills in Congress. We hope to get them into this reconciliation to make that happen, and it would be huge. I do think the thing about size of vehicles, I'm very interested in this thing of, the move to make fully electric pickups and SUVs. I got 4 kids. I needed a big-ish vehicle for those years, Michelle, and we have to electrify everything. We have to figure out what to do about dang cargo ships and, over-the-road trucks. So we can't, we've got to do everything, but I'm right there with Shalom that we have to move people into EVs way faster, and they're great. They're so amazing to drive, so let's go.
Totally agree. I even had a skeptical spouse, but it's been actually great to drive our Volt. So, and I think your point about point of sale is really important. It's a matter of justice. Not everyone can afford to float that money until they get their tax money back, right?
100%. Absolutely. Let's make it doable for people, not just, rich people who want to have a Tesla as a vanity project. Excuse me.
Exactly. So Drew from Rochester, Vermont says, how can we ensure that Democrats in Congress act at the scale of the crisis? Is concerned that we may end up with infrastructure legislation that does not act on climate.
Drew, for one thing, we're not even acting at the scale of the crisis. How you got to admit, or for me anyway, I'll just speak for myself. I was kind of surprised and gratified that Joe Biden came out with the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan and the American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan included so much climate stuff in it, has hired amazing climate leaders, like Deb Haaland and Granholm and you know, on and on. But here's the thing. We've got to go much faster. And the specific answer to your question is there is quite a danger that not only will this reconciliation thing get messed up altogether, but that it also, how big will it be? How climate focused will it be, right? This is a live question right now that's about hitting the streets, hitting the airwaves, hitting your social media. Everybody just has to create such an environment to require the Joe Manchins and Christian Cinemas and whoever else those, you know, kind of centrists are. Remember, we need all 50 votes in the Senate and virtually all the votes in the House, with where we have the smallest margin of in decades. So we need a lot of big voice and a lot of pressure on us from the outside to make sure we make it the boldest, biggest climate reconciliation we could possibly do. And that's, Michelle, that's why your leadership is so amazing and important, and all these people you gather together. Let's go. I'm ready, but we need your help.
One final question.
Sure.
Thank you. Birchall from Colorado. How can we support local solutions to the climate crisis, like microgrids, that would help support local economies?
Did you say Virgil?
Birchall.
Birchall. Okay, Birchall. You're singing out of my hymnal. So I'm on the Education Labor Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee. How about this, Birchall? Why don't we do an inventory? And this may seem far afield to you, but I swear I'm talking about your local solutions. Think about all the places in the world that never came close to having 24/7 electricity, right? Why don't we leapfrog, obviously, because we have to, the old-fashioned ways of doing it, and look at the whole, like, just take Latin America for one region. Why don't we do an inventory of all the offshore wind resource of Latin America, all the onshore wind resource, all the solar resource, all the geothermal resource, and then figure out for every place how we can create locally generated electricity and have microgrids in that area where they produce their own energy. And, you know, this could create so many American jobs building all this stuff. And not only that, then we can start sharing the jobs with people. Like, people are freaking out about the Northern Triangle, right? What if Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador, what if we were offering to partner with them to begin to build some of all the stuff they need there for a clean energy future right now? And so obviously I'm for doing this in Colorado, but look, this is a global crisis that we have to tackle on a global scale. So let's use what we do in your area, Birchall, and then spread it out to the whole world, because it's got to happen, and it's got to happen right now.
Absolutely. And I love that you took that and talked about how this is a global problem. In some ways, a global problem that, you know, in many ways, actually, profoundly, that the richer nations have exported to the global South.
Right. How much of all the greenhouse, you know, gases have we produced throughout the, you know, Industrial Revolution more recently? And so many of my colleagues, especially Republican colleagues, but not only, are just constantly freaking out about China, you know, Belt and Road and all. And their response, Michelle, to me is sort of like anxious and defensive. Yeah. What if we have a broad-shouldered, big-hearted, innovative American responses? Let's not worry about the Chinese. Why don't we go and partner with these poor countries who are suffering, you know, because of all the, you know, the greenhouse gases we've been putting out there for so long, and let's help them in a way they'll never forget, that supports their own economic development. You know, so I think I'm excited about this opportunity, but we've got to act really fast and really comprehensively.
We do. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Always make me think, and go forth and do good things, as you always do.
Thanks. Well, I'm going to go work on getting my constituent Danny Fenster out of a horrible prison in Burma. So everybody check out Danny Fenster and raise up his name in your social media accounts, because we're going to get him out of there. He's a journalist who was just trying to report on that coup. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.